The seventh Ikad, here Rambam spends more time than any other Ikad, and he goes into it at great length. This Ikad is the Nevu'ah of Moshe Rabbeinu. The Nevu'ah of Moshe Rabbeinu is not just that he receives Nevu'ah, we have a special Ikad to believe that Moshe Rabbeinu was the greatest Navi. He calls him Abihem, she'll call him Nevi'im, Shlefanav or Laharav, before or after, right? There was no one who was like him or will be like him. Kulam em tahtav b'madrega. Making a Ikad about level of Nevu'ah. Hu b'chir Hashem mikol min ha'enoshi. And that Moshe Rabbeinu was the chosen from all humanity. Hamesig mimenu yitalo yoter mima she'esig v'yasig kol adam shenimsa v'yimatzeh. A Ikad that says that not only was he greater than everyone that preceded him, but that nobody will be as great as him. And that's an Ikad. That's an interesting idea. And of course, the reason for Harambam doing this is the validity and really, as I mentioned, one Ikad was this leads into the next Ikad, which is the eternity of Torah, right? Because he is the greatest of all Nevi'im, Torah can never change. He became angelic being, and he received the level of the angels. There was no mechitza. We'll discuss for a moment the mechitzot. This is something that Rambam discusses at length towards the end of the Shmona Prakim. A mechitza is basically a metaphor. Obviously, there's no physical mechitza between man and God, as there's no space and place, but it's a defect in character. When the Navi, to be a Navi, is perfected in all Chokhmah, but nobody could be perfected in all of character, so there leaves certain character flaws, and those character flaws are mechitzot. Rambam, according to his understanding of character flaws, meaning anyone who is not in the perfect middle in a specific trait, rather he is a little bit leans towards one extreme or the other, that is called a character flaw. And in that character flaw that's migra'at midotit, and that is what Harambam talks about as a mechitza. And Moshe Rabbeinu had no mechitzot at all. Lo nish'ara lo mechitza shelo kra. There was no mechitza between him and HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he didn't rip through, meaning he had perfected his character to absolute and total perfection. Velo ikevo me'akev gufani. And no physicality stopped him. Velo pigamo shum hisaron. Lo me'at velo rav. He had no flaw. Now, just to move on, there is a little bit of a contradiction here in Harambam's words. In the Perusha Mishnayot, it says he has one transparent mechitza. One mechitza, which is the fact that he was a human in a goof. Elsewhere in the same work, he talks about one mechitza, which is one character flaw that he had in terms of kas. So there are almost three contradictory statements, which we will not discuss now, but the Mefarshim and later commentaries all attempt to understand these statements and how they don't contradict each other. And there are many, many interesting interpretations, but I just wanted to bring that point out. That although over here, he's making a big generalization, that there are absolutely no mechzot between Moshe Rabbeinu's Nevu'ah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. ונתפתלו ממנו הכוחות הדמיוניים החושים בהשגותיו. Harambam says there are two things that, and again in the Shmona Prakim we talk about different kohot of the nefesh, and one koach is koach hadimayon. Koach hadimayon is the imaginative faculty, which the Harambam leads a person astray off of the true understanding and path of reality. Hakam has to subjugate his koach hadimayon to the koach hasechel, his understanding, his intellect. In the Moreh Nevuchim, He said that a Navi can use Koach HaDimayon once he's perfected his Koach HaSechel. There is a place for it to interact with Nevu'ah, because Nevu'ah happens to him, as we'll see, when he is in a dream or in a sleep. Moshe Rabbeinu was not only pure Koach HaSechel, intellectual, but he obliterated his Koach HaDimayon, and he did not even use it or need it for Nevu'ah. That's what he means when he obliterates the Koach HaDimayon. Meaning his Nevu'ah doesn't interact through the Dimayon at all. Also, and this is an interesting idea of Harambam, Ve'hushim Basagotav. He does not, there are different ways that we understand reality. Most of us, all of us, understand reality through our sensory perception. And we use that, and from there we develop our intellect. Harambam, many places, sides with the group of philosophers, this was a philosophical debate, that the rational element of the human being is much more reliable than our sensory perception. And Moshe Rabbeinu, he says literally, mitbatlu hahushim b'hasagotav. Doesn't mean to say he had no sensory perception. He was not hasv'shalom blind, definite. Rather, in his hasaga, in his understanding, he did not rely on his sensory perception, but on his intellectual understanding of things. There's a lot hidden here, and there's a lot more to talk about, but that's an interesting point which Harambam makes. V'nidham koho hamitorer v'nish'al sechel bilvad. Okay, so koho hamitorer is the impulse to act. That's what gives us the impulse to act. And to discuss the koach mitorer is the what Harambam describes in the Shmona Prakim as the impulse to act. That the and this usually comes from man's desires to approach something or to remove something. He is attracted to it through his desire for something or fear of it, and this is heavily influenced by man's emotional impulse. Harambam had subjugated that entire koach in the of his neshama and left with him pure koach hasechel, and so therefore, if we're talking now about the functions of the nefesh, right? So the Harambam counts in the Shmona Prakim 5 functions. Number 3 is koach hadimayon. Number 4 is koach hamitorer. Number 5 is koach hasechel. Moshe Rabbeinu removed from himself dimayon and mitorer to the point where he is pure sechel. And what makes the fact that he says no intermediaries of malachim, that means that he is pure sechel. A malach, according to Rambam in the Moreh, doesn't necessarily mean only angels. It has multiple meanings to it. And here, directly with Hashem, without malachim, is the removal of the koach hamdameh, which other Nevi'im relied on for Nevu'ah, which Moshe Rabbeinu did not need. His Nevu'ah simply took place through koach hasechel, and he had no koach hamitorer involving him in emotional attractions, rather simply pure sechel. And that's how he connected with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And now Harambam goes on to say that he would have liked to actually write and discuss this concept of Pe'el Peh and other aspects of it, but he realized that they are extremely precise ideas and that they would need a tremendous elaborate discussion through introductions and through parables, and he'd have to discuss about the Metziut of Malachim, what Malachim are. And Harambam does that, the different levels of Malachim, as Helek Darkotehem, as Harambam discusses in Hilchot Yesodei Torah, 10 levels of Malachim, and the different aspects of Malachim that he talks about in the Moreh Nevuchim. We would have to discuss that. and then he'd have to discuss the different parts of the nefesh, which, as I said many times, that is the entire work of the Shmona Prakim. And after that, the different surot that and ways that the Nevi'im have interacted through these different surot with Hashem and the Malachim. And this, even if I was extremely precise, he says, would come up to 100 pages minimally. So he says, I will leave it for one of the two works that I have created. Either the work on Derashot, which we do not have, or the work of on Nevu'ah, which I have begun to write. We also do not have that work. It's very possible that he began to write it, and it was incorporated into the Moreh Nevuchim in Helek Bet, where he discusses many, many chapters of different levels of Nevu'ah, or it's possible the work was never completed. We don't know. But we do know he spent a lot of time in the Moreh Nevuchim on Nevu'ah. We certainly know that the Perush Dirashot, which he wanted to write, was never written. As I mentioned, his son Rabbeinu Avraham ben Rambam did a lot of work with that. Or B'Sefer Perush Elu Yisodot, or in a work that will explain all of these Yisodot. Now I will go back. He says Ashuvah El Yisod Shevi'i, and I'll say that Nevu'at Moshe Rabbeinu is different from the Nevu'ah of other Nevi'im in 4 ways. The first way, which is already explained, he just states it here. Ki en zin Nevi shiyeh lo yidaber Hashem imo ela yedei emtza'i u'Moshe lo emtza'i kemo she'amar pe el pe adaber bo. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't have it through intermediaries as other Nevi'im do. What are those intermediaries? They could be actual malachim, or they can be the other aspects that we've just mentioned through Koach HaMitorer and Koach HaMdameh. Those are also, in a certain sense, as Rambam just said, malachim, that the other Nevi'im see through. That Hevdel Sheni, all other Nevi'im, ki kol Navi lo tevor Navi ela be'et hashena, kemo she'amar b'kama mekomot b'halom halayla, right? They get their Nevu'ah in sleep, as it says many places. Halom halayla, vayahalom, b'halom hazyon layla. All of these mentions to dreams where Hashem appears to the Nevi'im. That's one way they do it. Or another way, bayom, a slumber will fall on the Navi in the middle of the day. All his senses will be lost. He will not have the sensory functions. And also his thoughts will be cleared like when he's asleep. This is called Mahazeh Umar'eh. In the Moreh, Rambam distinguishes between the levels of Navi in Halom and a Navi in a Mar'eh and a Mahazeh. Rambam elaborates many different levels of Nevi'im, other than Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the highest level, but he talks about many, many different levels of, through the Avot and through the other Nevi'im, and some of them are distinguished by this concept of Mar'eh, Mahzeh, and Halom. Umoshe Dibur Bayom, who made ben Shnei Kruvim, he's middle of the day, standing in the Knei as Hashem told him, V'no'adti lecha v'dibarti mecha. And as he says, Im yeh nevi Hashem b'mar'eh elav v'tvada b'halom edarbevo lokin avdi Moshe. I will not speak to Moshe in a Mar'eh or in a Halom. Hevdel Shlishi, the third difference. Ki hanavi asher tevo'ehu nevu'ah, a Navi that receives Nevu'ah, even though he had those first two differences, which imply a lower level than Moshe Rabbeinu, B'mar'eh, which is the first difference. I'm sorry, B'mar'eh, which is the second difference. V'ayidei malach, which is the first difference. Yehalesh mizgo v'yitmogeg binyano. He will have a weakened state of being during the time of Nevu'ah. V'tipol alav ema gdola, a great fear will fall upon him. Kim'at shetetzeh nafsho biglala. His nefesh will almost leave him because of that. Kemo shediber Daniel k'shediber alav Gabriel b'mar'eh. Daniel received Nevu'ah through Gabriel, representing Malach, but Mar'eh, meaning not awakened state, but Mar'eh. Amar velo nish'ar bi kochi v'hodi nefach alai nemashhit v'lo atzarti koach. Talks about losing all of his koach. Ve'amar v'ani hayiti nirdam al panai ufanai arza. He's sleeping and his face to the ground. Ve'amar b'mar'eh nehefku sira alai. In the mar'eh, all my strength has turned upon me. U'moshe enoken. And the Yevo'eh dibur v'lo yisigi oret b'shum panim. He has the dibur without any fear. V'omro b'ver Hashem Moshe panim al panim kasher yidaber ish el re'ehu. Like a man speaks to his friend. Solomar kemo shelo tipol adam harada b'dibur havero. When a friend, when a person talks to his friend, he's not afraid, he's not intimidated. He was not afraid from the dibur with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the state of panim bepanim. And this only came because of his connection through sechel. Sechel is the method to interact with the nevuah. And because he was so connected to sechel, is why he was able to have this strong connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. B'vdel Nevi'im, fourth and final difference. Shekol Nevi'im lo tevei nevuah b'bchiratam. Navi can't choose when he becomes a Navi. Ela b'rson Hashem. The will of God chooses the time and place. U'pa'amim she'amod Navi meshech shanim v'lo tevei nevuah. Navi could wait for years and not receive a nevuah. ופעמים יבקש מן הנביא שיודיע דבר בנבואה ויעמוד עד שיתנבא בו אחר ימים או אחר חודשים. And sometimes it will be asked from the Nevi, right, that he should tell us something through nevuah, and he'll have to wait for the nevuah days or months, or he'll never get it. וכבר ראינו מהם מי שהכין עצמו בהרחבת נפשו וזיכוך מחשבתו כמו שעשה אלישע. They prepared themselves with clarifying their nefesh and their mind, and like Elisha did, kuli menagen, he needed a menagen to clear himself. ובעטו הנבואה, and the nevuah came and frightened him. ואין זה הכרחי שינבא כאשר יכין עצמו. Even after he prepared himself, he may not receive nevuah. ומשה רבנו כאשר רצה אמר, עמדו ואשמע מה יצווה השם לכם. Moshe Rabbeinu received nevuah when he wished. He says, wait and let me find out what Hashem commands you. ואמר, דבר אל אהרון אחיך ואל יבוא בכל עת. Hashem tells him, tell Aaron that he should not come at any time. ואמרו, אהרון בבל יבוא ואין משה בבל יבוא. Moshe Rabbeinu could enter in any time and interact and connect with HaKadosh Baruch Hu.